And if you span that over 20 to 30 years, it's time to put your feet up. And these people are being forced to potentially stay another 5 years in a job that is very physically and mentally demanding.
Teachers, childcare, in their 60s, on the cusp of retirement, and I cannot emphasize this enough, they are absolutely desperate to retire. They're on their knees and they just want to scrape by, and they're just counting down the days until they can stop working because their body feels tired, their mind feels tired, and they just want to put their feet up. They've been working hard and they are in a position where they will get the state pension and things like that, and they do have some kind of other pension as well. So that's great, but I think the common theme that seems to be coming through to me is that for these people, they're desperate to stop, but the state pension and other pensions don't feel really enough. And I just think about the potential crisis that we're facing, that we have so many people that aren't taking this seriously, and then looking at the people that are doing it now who perhaps could be in a better position than with things like state pension or even just general pension benefits. If they're struggling, my gosh, our generation is, I don't know what it's going to be like, but we need to start doing something for sure.
Yeah, and to be specific to police, there was a big appeal about 5 or 6 years ago for people who were on an old pension. It was a very, very good pension, and it was deemed after an appeal that there was discrimination to people's age, and actually it appealed, and they were successful with their appeal because they tried to lower the pension and increase how many years people had to work, and it affected a lot of police officers across the country, and it just goes to show, in something that seems as concrete, that you're going to have this amazing pension isn't so concrete, and things can change. And because people are so reliant on whatever it is, whether it's a defined benefit pension in the public sector or the state pension when you're 68, let's say, for example, for me, that we don't know if that's going to be around, exactly when it's going to happen. So people always just put it off for the future. And I've spoken to a few people now who, very similarly to you, that you said in the last couple of weeks, you've spoken to people coming up to retirement. And it's so sad because I've spoken to a few officers that have, like you said, they've earned their retirement. They have, if anyone spent a day with the police in today's society, you would realize how hard they work. And if you span that over 20 to 30 years, it's time to put your feet up. And these people are being forced to potentially stay another 5 years in a job that is very physically and mentally demanding. And that, to me, very much terrifies me, not having the option towards the end. And I think that's the same in any industry. If you just think, that, let's say 60, I think that's probably the age that everybody would say, yeah, I would like to retire at about 60-ish. I've got my mother, my partner's parents that they haven't got the option to do that because they just haven't done that planning at a young age and put those practices into place. And that, for me, is probably the biggest driving force for worrying about the future and retirement, is the fear of getting to that age and having to work a lot longer than I need to. Everybody knows a police officer's salary. All you need to do is do a quick Google search and you can find out. So there's no way to hide that. Everybody knows what you're earning, all your colleagues, and everybody knows. So there's no real need to discuss that. And everyone's quite open about that. And, the incremental progress to get to the point where you're earning as much as you possibly can. That's always obviously the goal. I think people are open to talk about pensions because it's so widely talked about in society, in the news. Everybody knows police have a better pension than most. So I think that's talked about enough. I don't think we need to focus on that, but we aren't in society talking about the initial values of people and why you need to save. And people are terrified for other people to find out about their debts and what they're actually spending the money on, how much money they're spending on going out and eating. And these people, nobody wants to talk about it. And I think until the information is accessible enough through channels like, let's say, what we're doing, or Martin Lewis, and I think things like that, there needs to be more people that are viewed as inspirational. And I think Martin Lewis, before I started learning about sort of personal finance, I viewed him as the kind of the person who I would go to. But he's a very sanitized version of what I think a lot of people are talking about in the sort of realm that potentially you and I are kind of in. We're kind of going to the real sort of depths of the mindset and investing. And I think he's the opposite of Dave Ramsey almost. He's almost like he can't talk about the investing because I think he would just get lynched if he said something slightly wrong. So I think he's almost the opposite, very, very cautious. He does have to be. I think behind a closed door, he would have a different conversation to talk about potentially what he does. But I think as the mass market, he talks about, and I'm not going to go at Martin Lewis because I think he's brilliant, but we talk about, saving £1 here, £1 there. Those are all things that we need to focus on, but we also need to focus on investing and why we need to invest. And I don't think, because he doesn't talk about about it, it's not in the zeitgeist. People aren't talking about it and sharing that sort of information. He talks about pensions, which I think is great, and he talks about student loans quite a lot, which I think because he talks about it quite a lot and he has a massive audience and he's on almost every TV channel that you put on telly. So I think people will talk about student loans more. But until we have more people like him that have a large platform and they're going to be on TV and talk about these things, let's say like in America, Dave Ramsey, because you will see that the statistics don't lie. In America, more people invest, a lot more people invest. But that's because there's more people in the public sphere talking about investing. You know, people in England are, most people that I talk to about investing view it as gambling. And I know that because I used to view it as gambling too. And I used to think it was very much, you're putting all your money into Tesla. What if Elon Musk ruins, electric cars and his stocks drop, you lose all your money and there goes your pension. That is honestly how I viewed it. And until you do learn about things like index funds, and who knows about index funds? Unless you YouTube an index fund, the average person in the street has no idea. So we need to have more people who are mainstream talking about it. And I don't know if it will happen because, like you said, you have to be cautious. You have the overarching sort of ombudsman watching on you and making sure you don't say one wrong thing because you're going to get yourself in trouble. And like you said, your audience is way more likely to know what that is than the average person in the street. And even 60% of your audience didn't know that. And that's, and it really does show what the information available to the average Joe is in the UK at the moment. Absolutely. I think you've touched on a valid point there. It really doesn't need to start with a lot of money. I started investing with Moneybox about sort of 2.5 years ago. And that's because, at that time, sort of putting £10 into the stock market was I was thinking, can I afford to lose £10? But I thought, you know what, I can. Let's try that. Put £10 in. And then as soon as you do it, you realize this isn't as scary as I thought potentially it may be. And then you just incrementally, up it. And then you put £10 every month. And then you can add it to £15 every month. And before you know it, you're not thinking about it. And you just by practicing it, you're learning how to do it. You don't need to know the ins and outs of how the stock market works. Because I don't think, even people who spend a lot of time learning about it really fully understand it. But once you actually do it and practically put money into it and see the numbers go up and definitely down, then you start to get desensitized to it and you realize this isn't this terrifying thing that I once thought it was, that hedge funds and really, really rich people put their money into the stock market. That's not the case. Anybody can get started now. Even my 8-year-old daughter has money in the stock market, for goodness sake.